Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. This wonderful world of digital is always full of new surprises. Well, a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Chiara Marvuglio. I am the Engagement and Communications Manager here at Fundación Botna, and I will be your facilitator for this session. We are thrilled that you have joined us at the Ashoka Changemaker Summit this year in 2020 on rediscovering certainty. And we are especially excited that you have chosen to join our Fundación Botna session on how digital can better support meaningful youth participation. Now, before I go into too much detail for the session, we want to catch you while you are still nice and fresh. And you also get a flavor that we're going to make this session as interactive as possible. So without going too much further, let's get started and let's get digital. First of all, I want to mention our wonderful session coordinator, Camilla, who will be supporting all of our engagement activities today during this session. So Camilla has prepared a Slido for us, and it would be super if all the participants in our session could enter the event code #DYP. We've already shortened digital youth participation. So Camilla will post in the chat for this session, and it would be great if you could go to Slido and let us know what you hear or what you think when you hear the term digital youth participation. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? So we'll give you a couple seconds to complete that. Great, I can see some responses are coming in. There we go. Fantastic. Any more? We can see opportunity, which is going to be a big part of our discussion today. Super. So while you're still sort of joining us and getting warmed up and sharing your thoughts on what digital youth participation means when you first think about it, I'm going to share a little bit more about Fundación Botna and about our agenda today. So at Fundación Botna, we are a Swiss-based foundation based here in Basel, Switzerland. And we focus really on how we can better improve the health and well-being of young people around the world. And we see the great opportunity for how digital can be harnessed to help accelerate this improvement in health and well-being. But of course, because we are very much focused on how to improve the well-being of young people themselves, we also have a core principle, the strong participation of young people. And this means how can we better bring young people into our program design, but also eventually into our processes. And this was a big motivation for the discussion today at the Ashoka Changemaker Summit, is how can we better understand the needs and the ideas and the role of digital to meet those needs of young people, really where they are. I mean, we know increasingly that many young people are online and are digitally engaged. So how can we better meet them where they are? And in the process, who are we missing out as part of this? And so I'm joined by a very dynamic panel today, and by many of you also in the session. So we look forward to hearing from your perspectives from the various projects that you're involved in, and also from your personal experiences. So today we will hear from several of our speakers, and we'll continue to do a series of polls to gather input from our audience. We see this as part of an ongoing series on how we can better understand the role of digital. So all of your contributions today will also feed into our future thinking. So please feel free to share your ideas and your experiences, and we look forward to seeing how we can continue to make to bring them into the reality of our work. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Stefan Germann, CEO of Fondation Botner, who's going to share a little bit more about what youth participation means to him and also to us as a foundation.
Well, thank you very much, Chiara, and it's great to be with all of you here today with this exciting topic. Interesting to see on Slido the sort of, some of the elements that we have in terms of what comes first to mind when we talk about digital youth participation. So we have opportunity, we have inclusion, we have as well overrated, and that's an interesting one. And so I would like to sort of put it into a bigger frame. I think we need to acknowledge that today, collectively, we face a governance crisis. We kind of know that most of the big challenges that need to be tackled, like climate change, like corona pandemic right now that we all are impacted on, requires long-term solutions. There are no quick fixes. They require regional or global solutions, and there are solutions that are not always popular to all of us. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that most of our political systems are actually the opposite of where the solutions are. They are short-term, 4-year cycles, maybe 5-year cycles of voting. They are not regional or global, they are national. So it's very national focus. And most political systems today are populistic. So there is a disconnect between where the solutions are that we collectively need to tackle and where the current political systems are. And now that's where actually the potential of digital participation and digital governance could have tremendous potential if we really would think innovative outside of our national boundaries and really become inclusive in terms of participation. And I think young people who have grown up with digital sort of means, some they kind of use the notion of digital natives. It's less about being natives or not, but it's having a digital mindset and understanding how digital actually, can be moved forward. But we collectively really lack innovations of how to harness this in a fair, transparent, and inclusive manner. And so I would like to really encourage you here as part of this exciting panel today, and you from the audience, to really come up with visions and bold visions how we could do this different. I mean, let's take climate change. Some of the sort of, solutions could be aggregated through global participations of millions of people and bringing their voice through digital, and can keep governments accountable. It's a matter of creating the necessary global frameworks to do so. An increasing interesting aspect is citizens' assemblies, where through digital means we can enhance the participation of young people. As a foundation, we have a strong focus on urban transformation. And we do things specifically at the city level, whilst it might be a little bit short-term wishful thinking to have these kind of digital participation at the global level. But let's start with meaningful young people's participation in the digital space within cities, within the sort of boundaries of local government. Now, important is, it's not that we need young people's participation. It's not about a need. It is your right. Young people have a right to participate. Almost all countries are signatory to the Convention on the Rights of the Child that has enshrined in Article 12 the right to meaningful participation. The same under the human rights umbrellas for those who are above 18. The right to participation is a right that you can claim. And so I would like to encourage us here in this discussion to really see how can we make sure that we can have more inclusive digital participation. What are we doing with those who don't have a mobile phone set or don't have access to broadband? How can we ensure they're still included in processes when they are not having digital access? How are we dealing with digital trust and transparency issues? So I would like to encourage you to have really, a great debate here and a good panel. So thank you so much and looking forward for the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stefan. Much appreciated. And so with those inspiring words, we're going to move already on to our next poll. And so before our speakers give away too much from their own perspectives, it would be great to hear already from the audience what are some of those ways, those inclusive ways, those ways that are fair and transparent from your perspective that we need to consider in terms of harnessing digital for youth participation. And really think about what creates meaning for you as a young person, if you are a young person joining us in the audience, but what makes you feel something has meaning in terms of engagement in general. I think essentially we are all looking for authenticity, for truth and trust. What makes us act. So feel free to share. Again, we're at hashtag DYP on Slido. And so while we're collecting those responses, we'll see them start to come in. Excellent. Great to see some key tenets of participation coming through already. Fantastic. Well, we'll keep collecting. Please continue to share your inputs as we slowly start to introduce our panel. But clearly we can see that it starts already to take partnership, equal partnership, along with a lot of other great ideas for bringing in strong perspectives. So I know our speakers are eager to get started and to share their experiences. So let's get to know them. So quickly, I'll just shortly mention each of them, and then we'll spend a bit of time getting to know each of our speakers. So we'll hear from Johannes Wendig from UNICEF in a minute, and then we're going to hear from Rudeb Mita from Omdena AI. Hey, Rudeb. And then Kate Pundik from the Young Experts Tech for Health Council. Hi, Kate. And finally, we're going to hear from an Ashoka Fellow herself, Regina Honu. Hey, Regina. Fabulous. Great you could all be here. So let's start with Johannes. Johannes is from UNICEF. He is the lead on a Fondation Botner UNICEF initiative called the African Youth Digital Innovation Platform, which is catalyzing young people's creativity and solicits their ideas on systemic challenges facing society, the social sectors in Africa. The platform has followed a 2-year human-centered participatory design process with a very exciting startup emerging called Yoma, which I'm not going to divulge too much because I know we're eager to hear from Johannes more about Yoma. So yeah, over to you, Johannes. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Chiara, and hi everybody. I think really building on what was said, the design process with young people brought out several things because we wanted to know from their perspective what actually hinders their participation to create the ecosystem itself. And we are often thinking about what are the problems young people are facing, but the first problem is that the ecosystem itself hasn't been created by themselves. facilitate innovation. And from that perspective, there were particularly two issues they were very concerned about. The first one was that the innovation ecosystems, digital innovation ecosystems across Africa, are more focused on the institutions than they are focused on the young person. So the young person is not at the center. The second issue was that only a few young persons actually have access to those innovation ecosystems. And therefore, in the design process, the young people said, well, what we actually want is an ecosystem, a new ecosystem that puts the young person at the center, the agency of the young person at the center. And that's where YOMA came up, the Youth Agency Marketplace. And as you can see on the slide, basically, YOMA has 3 dimensions. The first one is to impact. So young people impact at their community level through impact tasks, go to very simple, cleaning up the environment or helping the community to fulfill a goal. They get use tokens, they get a token for it. The second dimension is basically that young people grow. So there are individualized learning opportunities and growth opportunities, and it's growth in action. So basically the task link back to the learning in action and the 21st century skills that are acquired. Everything is at the core in your digital wallet. Everything is in your self-sovereign identity, which is a concept on agency where young people own the data. Nobody else can exploit the data. It's computing at the edge. And so basically you build up a virtual CV, and that's the third one, which is Thrive. You can build a virtual CV that has a trust because everything is blockchain, so you can seamlessly pursue everything, and basically you can share with the employers market of entrepreneurial opportunities the CV that you as a young person have built up. And it's an ecosystem. Any partner can play in it if they adhere to the same ethical standards, which is obviously data ownership, privacy, youth agency. And therefore, the YOMA as an ecosystem can also arbitrate between a global demand for SDG impact, such as the environment, for instance, and young individual or group collective activities of young people that can fulfill that and therefore can be scaled. And in the end, we hope there's a different paradigm for what we call now the development industry emerging, where young people are at the core, where young people are not only volunteering, but they also recognize to what they're doing. It actually builds their lives and it contributes to their livelihoods. Thanks.
Thanks, Johannes. Very exciting. And where is this where's YOMA currently taking place? Is it really in the whole West African region, or is it started in specific countries already?
Yes, so the current challenge we are having is, for instance, in 13 countries, and we are already having this current challenge is called Reimagine Your Future, around 65,000 young people. Our target is to have 1.5 million young people on the platform by the end of 2021. So it starts out of Africa, but it already outgrows. We already have participants in Iraq, in South America, in Europe. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, thanks so much, Johannes, and I know we're eager to hear more in the as we move on in the discussion. Thanks. And moving on to another startup, Omdena AI. Welcome to Rudaheb, who is the founder of Omdena, AI, which is a bottom-up collaborative platform for building AI solutions, also often together with young people themselves, to give them the opportunity to use their AI and digital science skills for social good projects. Fundación Botna was very excited to run a challenge together with Omdena earlier this year about how to better understand young persons' aspirations through a listening exercise over social media and other online platforms. Yeah, welcome, Rudaheb. Good to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about Omdena AI?
Yeah, thanks, Chiara. So as you correctly said, so Omdena is a bottom-up collaborative platform. And the goal of Omdena is to empower people to solve their challenges by themselves without necessarily relying on governments or big companies to come and solve that problem. And we started 18 months ago. And we thought that well, AI and machine learning in particularly has the potential to solve a lot of great problems in the society. So the way we work is, let's say any organization or a startup or anyone can come in and say, hey, this is an interesting problem. We then throw the problem to our community, and we select a group of people. And then they come together, often from all over the world. Currently, we had collaborators from 86 countries. So they come together, they collaborate, they learn from each other, and they solve the challenge within a very limited time. That's 8 weeks time. And this is what we have seen, that by this kind of approach, the solutions that are made are more inclusive, ethical, and efficient. And we all know that there's a big debate around why AI and machine learning solutions could be unethical. But what we have seen that when you build something, co-create collaboratively, and often involving people who are intrinsically motivated to solve that problem, they are not by design going to make unethical solutions, because they are also going to be the one who are going to use the solutions. So in terms of statistics, in the last 18 months since we started, over 1,700 collaborators from 86 countries have worked on 36 such challenges. And we have worked with organizations like UNHCR and the World Resource Institute and UNDP, World Food Program, but also with Foundation Botnar, but also the other end with many startups and small businesses. And that's where we are. And we are hopeful that what we are doing is going to make AI and machine learning more and more democratize it, and we can use it for solving a lot of great problems in the world.
Cool, thanks so much for that. And it was super exciting to see how this community of collaborators comes together from all across the world. The fact that there's all this different ideas and how they sort of manage to problem solve not only the societal problem, but also how they manage to solve the kind of project management coordination challenge by having, in 86 countries, I think there was something like 35, 40 countries involved in the challenge we were involved in, and it was super inspiring to see all of those ideas harnessed. Kate. Welcome, Kate. Kate Pundik is a young researcher currently completing her studies in technology policy at Yale University. She's a member of the Young Experts Tech for Health Council, which is a very exciting initiative that Fondation Botnar supports together with several other partners as part of the Transform Health Coalition, which I think she's going to tell us a little bit more about. Yeah, welcome, Kate. Tell us a little bit more about the Council, Young Experts Tech for Health, and where you've already started to see the opportunity for digital. I mean, you are representing, I believe the Council represents all the WHO regions. There's 12 of you. So not only is the topic of your work about the role of digital, which is of course crucial to achieving universal health coverage, but I mean, you must be a digitally enabled team to be able to complete your work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Kiara, and thanks to Foundation Botnar for convening this session. And yeah, that's certainly right. Young Experts Tech for Health. Our mission is that we're trying to reimagine healthcare by championing the need for youth voices to shape the future. And we really do, as you said, do that in a digitally enabled environment. So to recap, we're 12 young people who are experts in our own fields, and we represent the 6 WHO regions. So that gives us a unique perspective, but it's entirely enabled by digital tools. So I've actually only ever met one other member in person. The rest is all done through Microsoft Teams and platforms such as Zoom like this. And I think that it shows that a very crucial part of engaging young voices is not only having the digital environment and digital tools to make it accessible to young people, but also building an infrastructure around, enabling and asking for youth voices. So I think Foundation Botnar is really good in programs in, Young Expert Tech for Health has a dedicated full-time employee hosted at Plan Canada who helps us, manage everything we need to do within the digital space. So I think if there's going to be a key takeaway for me from how do we, use digital to meaningfully support youth. It really is about a mix of, being digitally enabled on one hand, but also having a sort of infrastructure set up to reach out to new voices. I myself am from rural Alberta, so in the middle of Canada, in a place where internet connection is really terrible. So I think digital tools such as this one really enable people to be at the table who historically haven't been. And you brought up the Transform Health Coalition, which is a coalition of global organizations working on digital health. And young experts have a seat at that table because of digital technologies. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kate. And very much looking forward to hearing your perspectives on bridging that digital divide between rural and urban. But I mean, there's of course many other gaps in how we can fully harness the opportunity of digital. And maybe now we move to our last speaker, Regina Honu. Regina is an Ashoka Fellow in Ghana, and she's the founder of Soronko Solutions, which engages girls in science and technology. And she brings them into through skills building and through various programs, which I'm sure she'll share more about, and wants to change that young people, the young girls are consumers, but really also really creators of technology. So yeah, Regina, welcome. Tell us more about what you're involved in.
Thank you, Kira. It's my pleasure to be on this panel. So just like you said, and one of the keywords that came out in your poll was inclusion. And for us at Soronko Academy and Soronko Solutions, it's a very important keyword. And what we realize is we're missing the female perspective in the technology that's being created. We know that there's a big skills gap when it comes to young people, but also there's another sort of gap when it comes to the number of females that create technology. So we wanted to bridge that gap. And so what we have is we've set up a coding and human-centered design academy, and that has a big focus on bridging the gender gap. We teach women and girls how to create technology, how to code, how to build software, mobile applications, and we also connect them to opportunities. So it's not just about the training, but it's also about creating that ecosystem such that once you are trained, you have different opportunities. So an example is, we actually have a business solutions center that's run by the women that we train, and the profits from that center goes to train more women in different communities for free. So these are different ways that we connect young women to using their skills in a practical way. And I think the last piece that I wanted to share is, for us, it's also important that we have the female participation and create more channels in women expressing their voices in different areas. So we empower women to be leaders, to speak up, to really be the voices for other women that can speak up. And also we include disabled communities. So we work with autistic and deaf children. So we are really about getting young people, to come into digital, and we are making sure that we don't exclude different groups.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Regina. And I mean, that already speaks well to Stefan's remarks in the beginning, and to a lot of what the audience has already expressed, is that, meaningful means co-creation, it means diverse perspectives. And so it's exciting to see what you're already harnessing in Ghana by bringing young girls more into shaping the future of technology for their country and for their own solutions. That's fantastic. So now we've heard that all of you have, of course, digital as an integral part of your work, and clearly see how it's being used to bridge gaps and to increase access to further skills, to further employment opportunities, to enrich ecosystems. I mean, clearly there's so many opportunities, and it's also our reality. It's also why we're meeting digitally at a global summit. So I think we're well aware of of how it could be and should be used for good. I mean, we still have a long way to go and a lot to still learn about the societal impacts of digital. But it would be great to hear just shortly from each of you what you've already started to reflect on as some of the limitations, some of the shortfalls, especially this big question I think a lot of us have is the sort of the connectivity issue, the access issue. Who are we missing? Offline. how do we bring them online, or how do we better meet young people where they are if they're not online, or even if they are, how do we bring them into these platforms when we can really harness their perspectives and their true participation. So yeah, actually, Kate, I would love to start with you just to hear, because I mean, you come from a rural context, and I know you shared with me that you had to move somewhere else so that you could have better internet connection to complete your studies. I mean, this is obviously a very real, a very personal experience, but your reflections more broadly on this sort of this digital divide issue that I think weighs heavily in the future of digital.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm a young researcher, and what I research is digital ethics and human rights. And so this is something that really consumes my everyday. And I think a lot of it really is about where I come from and the challenges that come with being in a rural community. And particularly, it's important to point out that this is especially important during the COVID era, because in a lot of, load management that has happened on connectivity issues, rural internet has actually gotten slower. So my internet at home with my parents has never been worse than it has been in the past few months. And I think the key message that I really want to transmit today is that we be careful that when we use digital tools, it doesn't give us a false sense of security. So just having, an open Zoom event where everyone can access, and theoretically anyone with the link could, join, it doesn't mean that it replaces the actual sort of organizing and more analog ways of reaching out to people. Because often, a lot of information is transmitted through informal networks. So I think everyone in the audience, or most people in the audience, probably, maybe heard about it from a friend, this event, or, has worked with Fondation Botnar in the past. And we kind of, when thinking about digital networks, we forget how much our world is still very much reliant on relationships and kind of more analog networks. And so I really think that that's something that we have to, keep in mind, is that digital is a tool, but it will never actually replace, reaching out and going to places where internet connectivity is bad, and, making an effort to find out how to best facilitate connections with young people. And oftentimes that's kind of the biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks so much, Kate. It reminds me, at Fondation Botnar, we've just wrapped up a challenge together with UN Habitat on how to solicit creative responses from young people on what their future city could look like. And we could see very clearly that those areas and those cities where we had really, local engagement through school networks, community networks, had a much higher, submission rate and a lot more, although they used digital to then participate in the challenge, probably the outreach came through a lot of this real life human interaction, which is still so valuable, and we certainly can't forget about that. Yeah, Johannes, I mean, this is it goes nicely into what you're working on. I mean, what is your experience? That, of course, you're building this incredible network of young people online. How do you bring the offline online? How are you working to bridge this gap? And would be cool to hear what your thoughts are.
I think, first of all, for me, digital participation is more digitally enabled participation. So the participation itself doesn't always have to be digital, but we use digital opportunities to facilitate the process, and therefore there's online and offline opportunities. And I think the key is, and that's probably the whole theme of a Changemaker Summit, is that in every community you have young people that are more enabled or more digitally literate and more inclined. And how can you support them and network actually them to reach out to their peers who perhaps don't have the same opportunity? So that's one. So really working through also grassroots organization, but also young people that are natural change makers. That's one. I think the other important element is obviously that when you want to do digital enabling, what is key is that your system itself reflects the ethos and the values you actually want to promote. So it's very important that actually whatever you do basically is in line with those values. Just to give you an example, who owns the data of the young people? Who can ever take benefit of the data of the young people? Is it themselves or is it somebody else? And so I think that's really crucial. Once young people also feel that what you do is authentic, then you will build trust. You have to build trust for a platform with young people. There is a lot of abuse out there, and obviously I think that's key. And then finally, obviously, is we see particularly also with gender engagement that if you just reach out digitally, you're actually reinforcing very often a gender divide. And so you actually have to learn, obviously, from your audience and from actually the agents themselves, how you have to readjust so that basically you reach much more inclusive audience.
Thanks so much, Johannes. That's I think that goes nicely into Regina, what you're working on. I mean, how in a similar sense, how do you bring? I see it's one of the questions that's come through. How you bring some perhaps more disadvantaged young people into the skills building? What are the sort of barriers to building this, the digital skills that perhaps could help to to have a more digitally enabled participatory system in the infrastructure in the future? What are some of your experiences?
Okay, so some of our experiences have been, first, the barriers would be mindset. I'll talk about that. Then obviously access to resources, the cost of data is actually, and also creating even enabling communities. And so for our work, when we're going even from urban to rural, or even within peri-urban areas, what we find out is the challenge. The first one is mindset, where lots of young people have been disillusioned to think that being able to go digital is not a prereq for everybody, and that you have to either come from a certain background or have certain exposure to be able to understand how to use systems. So we get a lot of this question, oh, I don't think I will be able to do it, or, oh, I don't think it's for me. And this is where they think, being able to fully navigate digital requires that you have a certain background. So we have to dispel that mindset and let them know that anybody can go digital. And I think it also stems from challenges from our educational system, which is based on a lot of rote memorization. So then already that critical thinking, problem solving element is a little bit lacking. So then you need to build that confidence in young people. And then obviously the barriers such as access. But I wanted to say what you have to do is a different channel approach. So like Johannes said, digitally enabled. So we have to look at analog and digital. So you can't just do a one size fits all and say everybody's supposed to jump onto a Zoom call. You have Zoom, you have to stream on Facebook, you have to do WhatsApp, and then you have to do radio, and then in some instances, SMS. So you have to understand which channel is the most effective to reach young people. And once you started to sort of educate them and then have the conversation around the different channels, they will now start to engage more. But definitely access, cost, power, those are all huge barriers.
Yeah, thanks so much, Regina. I think that's becoming emergingly clear, is this coupling of in order to become digitally enabled, we also need that sort of authentic, trusted engagement directly with communities, directly with young people, perhaps directly with parents. I see there's also some questions here around some of the fears that parents might have around having their children or adolescents exposed to a digital environment that they're not familiar with. I mean, that they're growing up within. I mean, Rhoda, but maybe it's a good time to come to you. And I mean, you are working, I think, almost exclusively digitally. And I mean, it's one thing that we considered also in our challenge with you is how do we account for the sort of the offline world, those young people that are not reflected in the digital landscape. I mean, maybe a related question is, I mean, is there a role for digital itself in helping to build the trust? I mean, there's so many innovations, so many solutions. I mean, could digital be one of those solutions in itself?
Yeah, so thanks, Kara. And What I would say this, as you correctly said, Omdena by design, it's itself global in nature. And because of the scale, we have to be online. I mean, unfortunately, we cannot be offline. But we are extremely careful, and even when we are working with you, about the models that we are building, that we are taking into account the data of not only the digital people in the digital world, but also in the offline world. And then that's where I think that where we can play the role is kind of showing that, look, this is what people in the digital world are thinking, and this is what the effects of the people in the offline world are thinking. We actually started working with UNDP and only last week, and where our focus of the challenge is to understand human development and connectivity, and to see how connectivity, people who are not connected and people who are connected, and how human development, especially in the age of COVID, but in general over the last 5 years, have changed. So how connectivity had an issue, and I think it's important for people to first understand that what are the causes, what are the effects of these before the policymakers and things can make those decisions or regulations, and that's where Omdena is trying to build that. Just one more example that I will give you, how can we use offline, bring the offline world. So we recently finished one challenge with World Resource Institute, and where we had to understand economic development and well-being of people. We could have easily used only the online world, but what we did, we had to actually understand the well-being and economic development of the rural world, not only the youth, but in general. So we use satellite images. We use satellite images to understand the type of roofs they live, the type of roads they have, the type of schools they have. Just from so there is, even they are digitally there, even if they are not connected digitally. It means that individually they're not digitally connected, but we do know their lives. We know how they live just by looking at, let's say maps or areas or satellite images of the places that they live in. So I think this is the way we can bring the offline world to the online world, understand their problems, their challenges, and then policymakers can make those right policies for those people.
Yeah, thanks, Rudab. I mean, I think that's a fascinating insight that I think actually more and more young people will be able to bring to the table for future challenges. Is that it's not only what's offline and online, but how do you leverage the online to better reach and to better meet and better understand the offline. I think there's so much more that we need to kind of discover about the true role of digital technologies and the new solutions that are emerging. It's been a super exciting discussion, so I'm going to skip to maybe some of the questions that have been coming through the chat, but I think we've already picked up on a couple of them. There's one here that's where did I see it? Yeah, this is a great one from Karina from Ashoka. I mean, how do we not only give young people the stage or give them the tools, but how do they create their own stage? How do they develop their own platforms, their own environments that make the most sense to them? It would be great to hear maybe first from Johannes what you've kind of learned through some of the challenges and what led to YOMA that really corresponded to this sort of participatory design, but that the young people kind of lead the way and not just step into the light, so to speak.
Yes, thank you. So obviously, good human-centered design processes bring that out. But I think it's in the end more a question of what kind of ecosystem we're building, because if you listen to young people and they really to their peers and go through the empathy stage, then you actually discover that very often the ecosystem themselves are more focused, as I said, on the institutions. What that means, the accelerators, incubators, whatever you call, they all have the inbuilt interest to survive. It's institutional logic. But how do young people navigate between all those different elements in an ecosystem? And how do you create an ecosystem that actually has them at the center, where the inherent tendency of the ecosystem is to keep them at the center? And I think there is where new technologies can come in, new concepts that are so different from big data concepts of the past, where they use agency through the self-sovereign identity, through the digital identity, through AI on the edge and other things, basically keeps the data in the control of the young people themselves, and they decide what happens with the data. Because obviously the key question is always who gets the value from the data. And so in the end, I think it's an ecosystem question, very much at the core. And if we make a more equal playing ground, so an ecosystem that is truly youth-centric, then that's the ground, and they will develop it themselves. But if obviously the stakes are already biased against them from the start, well, I mean, that's probably those decision makers that have set up systems that are highly skewed towards particular interests. Obviously, we have skewed the playing field. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something I was wondering about, Regina, actually. I mean, in terms of this sort of, human-centered design and participatory approaches to perhaps transforming the ecosystem. I mean, in Ghana and through your work, I mean, is there also some consideration on how the young people that have been involved in the trainings co-create future trainings? How do they feed into also kind of driving the employment opportunities that correspond with what they see the opportunities are? I mean, is this something that you're starting to see? Is it something that you're looking at how to better harness?
Yes. So, I mean, even before I answer that, I just want to say for young people, especially women and girls in my country, they are very entrepreneurial. And what we're seeing now is them having this knowledge and skill and then trying to solve different problems and monetize on those solutions. So you're seeing more young people creating employment once they have the skills and they've learned how to be able to use it effectively. So definitely you have to engage the full ecosystem for things to work. So what we have to do is you talk to parents, you talk to leaders, you talk to religious leaders. That's also another important group. You talk to policymakers to allow young people to lead, because sometimes they face so many barriers that they become discouraged in wanting to fully engage. So be it ways of setting up a business. So we have the conversation around how do we make it easy to set up a business, be it access to mentors. How do you give them access to mentors? Be it access to markets. How do you introduce more young people to bigger global markets with their new solutions or the products that they have? So really, it's important that these ecosystems understand that if you are empowering young people, you also have to give them the opportunity to lead, and don't just sort of limit them with, oh, you are too young. And I think the last piece is, culturally, there is this thing about elders having to speak up and, elders being more respected. Now that we're seeing more young people, especially using digital to voice out different things, we are seeing this change within the culture of having young people really speak up and old people sort of accepting that young people's voice are valid. And technology is really helping them to sort of change that narrative of the elder always has to speak and young people need to stay back, and they're really taking the lead.
Fabulous. Thanks so much. Thanks, Regina. And I mean, clearly there's great opportunity there, but I'd like to bring in Kate just shortly. I mean, there's something we've seen also in the questions is about, a little bit of the fear, maybe from parents, maybe from different members of communities. I mean, there's a lot of still uncertainty around young people. I mean, Johannes spoke a lot about, we haven't figured out this sort of owning of data completely at the global level. But what is your reflection? I mean, what would you, how do you balance maybe the opportunity versus, the risk and address some of that fear? What are some of your recommendations even?
Yeah, I think it actually goes back to what Regina was just saying about, redefining the narrative around young people. I think we often think of young people as, people who don't have skills or just, sometime in the future going to have skills and are in the learning phase. But like, young people actually know a lot of things, particularly if you think of the UN definition that goes to 25 or the Commonwealth definition that goes to age 30, like young people have the power to not only, offer and like add value to organizations, but they also have, a good understanding and a good head on their shoulders to be able to make these decisions. And I think switching the narrative so that it's less about, we're doing young people a favor. I think we should actually be tapping into the knowledge that young people have as, we use the term digital natives. Not all of us are digital natives, but really just kind of tapping into the expertise that exists in young people and recognizing that. And I kind of turns to one of the reoccurring questions of, can you give an example of how you put young people at the table? I think in a digital world, there's no excuse for not having a youth as a board member of every organization and every company on earth. And that kind of will come about once we recapture the narrative and say, young people are young, but they're also lawyers, they're experts, they're researchers, they're students, they're coders, they're hackers. They can build things themselves and, are the ones that can offer value rather than, always just having other people kind of give them opportunities as a nicety.
Thank you, Kate. Absolutely. No, that's very, very, very powerful reflection as we move into our final reflections. Just keeping an eye on time here, and I mean, we could easily have continued this discussion a while longer, but thank you so much, Kate. And maybe I give the chance to also the rest of the panelists to reflect a little bit about the future. What's next? What's missing? What's urgent from your perspective? It would be great to hear some closing remarks. Rudaheb, let's start with your reflections. And now that we started to unpack a little bit, I mean, there's still much more to go. What is most urgent from your perspective?
I'm sorry, did you ask me this question?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I missed that part. What is the most important thing from my perspective, right? So I think that I was just following up with the previous discussion, and what I would say is that it's the way I see is that we have to create, make sure that the youth and all the people come together and co-create and build the solutions, taking into account a bit more inclusive. And that's absolutely important. Like, when Regina was talking about women, and you have gone through, Chiara, the Omdena challenges. We had people from age group 17 till 65, working together collaboratively. So it's not just about youth 17 to 20, but it's also people in the 30s, 40s, and even 60s working together. Women, 40% of Omdena collaborators are women now. And I think from all over the world. And I think what we really need, that if we want to build the future solutions, we need diversity and really an inclusiveness, which is really a cognitive diversity, right? Like people, different thought process, age groups, and building solutions so that the youth have their strengths, absolutely, but the older people also have the knowledge and the strength. So we can leverage both the sides and build something together. And that's the way I see things.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And thanks for all your contributions, Rodab. Johannes, what about you? What's next? What's urgent? What's most critical from your perspective?
I mean, what's absolutely urgent is to unleash the force of youth and to basically stop standing in their way. That's what we mainly do as older people. And to do that, I think it's important to reduce the intermediaries that stand between the creation of impact and young people that can actually achieve that impact. And that we always say, okay, within that context, you young person, you can do something. And I think that's what we hope in the end the youth agency markets can contribute to, is really this disruptive energy that you have, basically this facilitation that is very direct with hardly any intermediaries, very low overheads. And in the end, it's just a marketplace where different young people can come together, and not young people, it doesn't matter, but that youth-driven energy, and that young people fairly get rewarded for what they are doing, and that in the end, you can create opportunities where there are none right now, because talent is universal and opportunities are not.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Johannes, and thanks for joining us. I was super keen to see how YOMA evolves, so great that you could share a preview and how that's progressing with us. Thanks so much. Regina, how about you? Some final reflections. What's next? What's urgent?
Yes, so I agree with everything that has been said. I just wanted to add that another urgent thing is, especially on the continent. We have a very youthful population, and it's important that, we bring everybody on board and that we empower, especially women and girls who mostly form 50% of different populations of different countries, young girls, not to be limited by gender-based violence, not to be limited by parental restrictions, not to be limited by their gender. So what is urgent now is we need to make sure that as the tide is changing, more young people, even women and girls, feel that they are not limited in any way. And like Johannes said, we step out of the way, and like Rudolph said, there's more inclusivity, more diversity, and everybody feels that they have equal opportunity to have their voices heard and then their solutions, taken out there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Regina, and for your great work and great contributions. And in the spirit of stepping out of the way, I mean, last word I give really to Kate. I mean, what also do you say to your fellow youth advocates, young leaders, young people, no matter what they're doing? What is a final message from you?
Yeah, I think the key message is for anyone in the audience or anyone listening to think about how tomorrow they can put a young person into their existing workflow. And that can be if you're a young person yourself. So, me as a researcher, how do I make sure that I'm paying it forward and giving the opportunity to somebody else to, speak on a panel like this, but also as like leaders of organizations such as Foundation Botnar, like what workflows exist and what are the points of entry that young people can be empowered to join in? Because if you give young people the opportunity, they can rise to the occasion, because the future of everything is pretty much in our hands, and we're going to deal with the consequences of it. And so I would say, like, key takeaways: put young people on your boards, vote young people into office, and support youth-owned businesses and fund them.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Kate. And yeah, powerful words for us to remember as we close this session. I think we've heard from our panelists, and thank you so much for the incredible insights, the powerful words, the strong reminders, and the urgent actions. As I said, we want this to be a sort of continuous series. At Foundation Botnar, we always are looking to listen, to learn, to better innovate. And so also it would be great if we could hear from the audience as they start to move already to the next sessions. We'll put up a last Slido. Let us know what are some of the urgent topics, some of the gaps, some of the themes that you are most concerned about after listening and participating in this session. Share them with us, and we'll take them into our future thinking, our future events, our future discussions. I mean, we talked a lot about participation, a lot about bringing in different perspectives, and this is also very much the spirit of Foundation Botnar, is to really harness the power of the community, so that we can better shape a positive collective future, which is of course also very much in the spirit of the Ashoka platform and the summit. So we'll put that last Slido up. Please share your final thoughts as you leave us today. Continue to follow Foundation Botnar on all of our social channels. We're going to be doing a short wrap-up blog on this discussion, and also answering some of the questions that we didn't manage to get to in this round. But until then, a big thank you to Ashoka for the beautiful platform that could bring us all together. Thank you for the speakers, the panelists, for sharing your work, for continuing to bring young people both into your work, but also stepping out of the way. I think that's a great message for us to all take forward. And thank you so much to our audience for all the questions, all the input, all the insights. Let's see if we can get that last poll up as we leave. But until we meet again, a big thank you to everybody. There we go. There's the last perspectives coming in. Thank you so much, everybody.